So, where did you guys place in your trivia event this week?
Oh, yeah. I know, because we both play bar trivia pretty regularly, right?
Yeah. Is yours on Wednesdays too?
Yes. It's also on Wednesdays.
Yes. We also
this
have trivia
past
on
week, we
Wednesdays.
were first place. First place.
That's so impressive. We always just aim to not be last.
I mean, that's a good goal.
Yeah, we've come close to winning a few times, but the categories have to be very specific because none of us are really great at the music rounds. And our trivia host always has a music round. A lot of times she plays music and then you have to name the title or the artist.
Yeah. I am fortunate in that some of the people I play with are very good at music. So they
you don't have to
know
worry about
all
that.
the music stuff. Yes. But I will say none of us are good at sports. So if there's
that's
question,
another one where we actually are lacking. Yeah.
I'm like, we're out. We got nothing. It's a sports question.
Guess.
No idea. Yeah. There was a sport question this past week that was some question about college basketball teams in the 1980s. And we were like, what? No one knows this.
Nobody knows that.
No one. Not even gonna try.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
With my PhD in geography
and my master's in library science,
doing deep dives on topics is our idea of a fun time together. We'll share our findings with you on
Researching the Obvious.
Well, you know what movie I watched recently? The Mummy.
I freaking love The Mummy. I love everything about The Mummy. I remember watching that movie so many times. We had it on VHS and I was addicted. Brendan Fraser was handsome AF.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And
excellent
character. Like he's like a little like rough and tumble Indiana Jones in that movie or something.
Yeah, he's like, cheeky. He's cheeky.
Yes,
for sure.
A little bit of a bad boy vibe.
Yeah,
but but also reliable.
Oh yeah. Exactly. He didn't leave them stranded in the desert.
And Rachel Weisz is a librarian, which is
we have
amazing.
Definitely talked about The Mummy on this show.
Yes.
On multiple occasions.
It's iconic. It's an iconic one.
It's iconic. And I feel like The Mummy also kind of relates to the topic that we're going to talk about today.
It does.
Which is makeup. The makeup in The Mummy is amazing.
Oh my gosh. I'll never forget. One of the first scenes of The Mummy is that woman who's all painted in gold.
Yes,
and with like all the designs on her. And I just remember being awestruck by that whole makeup look that she had going on.
As we're going to learn today, ancient Egypt plays pivotal roles in makeup.
Yes. They were the original trendsetters when it came to adding stuff to your face.
What's funny is we had this episode as an idea for season 1 of this podcast, but we never really got around to it. I don't know why we never got around to it. All I can think of is
we just have so many ideas. There were only so many we could get through.
It's true. But it did make me think though about when we first met in college and how not into makeup I was and how very into makeup you were.
Yes. We were like polar opposites when it came to that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I never wore makeup in high school or anything. So when we went to college and lived together freshman year, I think I had some mascara. That was my extent. The Great Lash, whatever. Obviously the best one.
The pink tube, green cap.
100%. What else were you wearing? Clearly. But still, I think that's all I had.
And then meanwhile, as I move in, I have a whole tote full of hair products and beauty supplies and makeup, and the entire top of my dresser was just filled with products, because not only do I enjoy using products, but I really enjoy trying new ones. So I would always have like 5 different products. I didn't use all 5 products, but I needed to have all of them so I could try them at different times.
Yes. I remember unpacking and looking over at your dresser and being like, what is this girl on? Why does she have 80 products taking up her entire Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with my tube of mascara.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think I peer pressured you into starting to buy some makeup too. Like,
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For
we would go to the pharmacy or whatever. And I'm like, you should try some eyeshadow. Like, here. Yeah. Like, I love this product. Try this.
Yeah. Because I was pretty much just mascara and eyeliner girl. As you know, a true millennial, you can pry the black eyeliner out of my cold dead hands.
Yes. That's right. And eyeshadow. I've heard that eyeshadow, they think eyeshadow now is just for millennials and Gen Xers.
Wait, what?
Like, apparently, yes, this is something that's been said. Like, eyeshadows, no. Like, you don't need eyeshadow. Gen Zers are very in favor of, like, a natural eye. And I read that trends this year are looking towards no mascara, which, I'm sorry, you can pry my mascara out of my cold dead hands.
No, absolutely not.
If I had to choose one makeup product to have, like, I would only allowed to have one. Mascara. Hands down, it would be mascara.
Yes. I mean, that's the one I went to college with.
Yes. It makes the biggest impact, look-wise, I feel like, with some of the easiest application.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're saying, like, no mascara, no eyeshadow. They're all about blush.
I don't like this trend. I mean, blush is fine, but I don't like I have giant eyeballs. I need to put all of the makeup on my eyeballs all of the time.
I feel like eyeshadow is one of the few makeups that I feel I get creative with, blending different colors or like how you apply it to your eye or like that kind of thing.
You do really good eyeshadow and eye makeup in general, I feel.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time watching videos, so like to figure out what I like, and how do I do that? But yeah, so no, I'm not letting that go away.
No,
I guess I'll just be the old millennial with eyeshadow on.
Fine, I don't care.
Yeah,
that's fine. But speaking of eyeliner,
yes,
I was gonna say I feel eyeliner is maybe one of the first makeups, but I don't know if that's true. I think all of these makeups are very old, but I went down this huge rabbit hole about eyeliner when I was doing research, and it just led me to all these other different makeups that we'll be talking about. But I think in general the story of makeup does start in Egypt. So
yes, I noticed that too.
Bringing it back to the mummy.
Yes, all the products that I looked at, they used that back in ancient Egypt. I'm like, okay, so ancient Egypt just used everything.
Pretty much. I think all makeup was invented in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. So some of the earliest instances of people wearing makeup, date back to 3000 BCE, sometimes even earlier than 3000 BCE, as far back as even 5000 BCE. Makeup is
old.
Very old. Yeah, we're talking like almost 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
That people have been wearing makeup and modifying their look. And what I found is that in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt and places like India, which is also a very, very old early civilization place, a lot of the makeup was originally used for a variety of reasons, but one, practicality, because it was preventing something, or for like a cultural, like religious sort of belief system. So I'll talk about eyeliner specifically in this instance, but so eyeliner in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, they used a form of eyeliner called kohl. That's the Arabic word, so they would have used a different word for it. It eventually became, which is Arabic word, but they weren't speaking Arabic back then. And then in India as well, ancient India, about the same time, they were using a product called kajal, but it's all like basically the same thing. It's an eyeliner made of different ingredients depending on where you were. Some areas
obviously
were using, could have been
not all of them.
Not all of them. It depended on the ingredient, really.
Okay.
Because some were using crushed seeds, some were using olives, and then some were using like soot. So, it might have had taken on a browner tint somewhere.
Okay.
Or, You know what I mean? Just depending on the color. But basically, they were wearing it to help protect the eyes from the sun. So that's why a lot of times it was only worn like on the lower lash line, which if you watch The Mummy, you will see everyone wearing it.
Yes. That dark, that classic dark, smoky under eye.
Looks so nice. Yes. So basically, it was used to protect the eyes from sun damage. They actually found that the version of kohl that was used in ancient Egypt, the ingredients that were in it not only were protecting the eye from the sun, they were also finding that it was to protect the eye from diseases, because the ingredients that were used in Egypt had health benefits that boosted the nitric oxide in their skin. And so that helped to ward off waterborne eye infections, which are common along the Nile in that part of the world.
Okay. So a real practical purpose there.
Yeah, it was practical from the sun, but also literally to like ward off these waterborne diseases. And then, like I said, religious too, in the sense that a lot of Mediterranean cultures and Indus River Valley, so in India and Mesopotamia and stuff, they have a belief in the evil eye. And so a lot of times they would say to wear the eyeliner to ward off the evil eye. And so they would even put eyeliner on young children and babies and stuff to ward off the evil eye, which I thought was kind of interesting.
On a related note, similarly with mascara, also used in ancient Egypt, and it was kind of an offshoot of the kohl eyeliner. So they would take those materials and then mix them with like ointments or maybe animal fat or things like that, and then brush them onto the eyelashes again for protection from the sun and things like that. So the mascara and the eyeliner, I think, in ancient Egypt kind of went hand in hand.
Okay. Interesting.
With some of the same purpose. Yeah. So also, ancient Egypt came up a lot in my research because I was looking at the history of mascara and then also brow makeup. So brow makeup in ancient Egypt, kohl, yet again, they use that also to darken their eyebrows and make them look more bold and large. Unless, of course, their cat had died, because then they would shave off their eyebrows so that everybody knows. Like, don't forget that. But
Right. They love an eyebrow in ancient Egypt, unless your cat died.
And also, when I looked at eyeshadow, they also said the earliest example of that would be people using kohl around their eyes or on their eyelids, right? So, like, that's kind of the earliest version of those types of makeup.
Interesting.
Thankfully, they did not use kohl in foundation, because I feel like that would have been weird, but but they did have some examples of kind of early versions of what we would call foundation. In ancient Egypt and Greece and ancient Rome, mostly because a lighter complexion was considered more attractive. So they would mix up things like chalk, some lead, just whatever lead you have laying around, and create like a paste and like pat it on their face to like kind of make their complexion look overall lighter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Lead comes up a lot in early makeup, because that was in versions of kohl too. They would have lead sulfide.
Not clean ingredients, people.
No. But fun fact, it is still illegal to import kohl into the United States, because about a third of kohl that's still produced today has trace amounts of lead sulfide in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like not great.
Unless you want lead in your eyes. But yeah, yikes.
I bought some kohl when I was in Morocco, and I'm a little bit like, oops.
No ingredients list on this. Not FDA approved.
Something, though, that I think was a safer makeup back in the day was lipstick. So I found this whole National Geographic article about the history of lipstick, but that also originated in Mesopotamia, and it was made with powdered minerals, crushed red rocks, usually like a wax from vegetation. Also cochineal bugs, which, fun fact, those are still used for red dyes and stuff today. Like,
really?
Yeah, like Starbucks uses it in some of their drinks and stuff. It was a whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, so Starbucks stopped using cochineal in 2012. I remember it was a whole thing because just vegetarian, whatever. But
right.
Yeah, so they phased out bug-based dyes from their foods in 2012. So so cochineal was earliest lipstick, and then we still used it for a long time to color things red. But what's kind of cool is we think of lipstick and we think of like reddish colors, but in Egypt, so both men and women wore lipstick to enhance their features. It was a gender neutral product. And they wore it in several colors based on, you know, just the types of minerals and stuff that they were crushing up. So you could wear lipstick in red, but also orange, magenta, or blue-black.
Ooh.
I know, right? So
to make a
fancy.
statement.
Yeah. Yep. Very fancy back in ancient Egypt times with the lipstick. And then I also saw nail polish too was being used back in ancient Egypt.
That blows my mind. Yes. I did not think nail polish would be that old.
Yeah. What's interesting is that what was being used in ancient Egypt and India almost 5,000 years ago was they were using henna to dye their nails or the tips of their fingers, but sometimes also just the nail beds itself. And so they have been using henna for a very long time. But the first instance of a colored nail polish that wasn't henna actually was found in China in 3000 BCE. So the Chinese were the first people that used a polish. And basically what they did was they soaked their nails in a combination of egg whites, gelatin, beeswax, and then dyes from flower petals.
Okay.
So you could get different light tinted shades from flower petals that would then just get soaked onto your nails.
So to stain them.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But because of the beeswax and stuff too, it kind of made it a little shiny.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times their nails were also in China worn with highly decorative nail guards that were created with hammered brass sheets. And sometimes those would be inlaid with precious stones. So these were almost like the first version of a fake manicure set situation.
So did they go over their whole finger or just like they glued them onto their nails? Do you know? Or did it say? I'm picturing my fingers with bugles on top, except brass bugles. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
the snack bugles when you put all those
when
on
you
your
put
fingers.
Them on 100%. It might have been like that. They described it as long colored talons.
Okay.
And they were
that's why I'm going to imagine it anyway.
Yeah. They were an indication of wealth and social status because basically you couldn't wear them if you were going to be working with your hands.
Yeah.
Duh. Yep. And then also what's interesting in China is that red nails were a high status symbol. So during the Ming Dynasty, people in the court would wear red nails to establish themselves. And it's interesting just the color red in general because in Egypt, Queen Nefertiti, who is basically a glam makeup influencer icon from ancient Egypt, but Nefertiti and also Cleopatra wore red nails as well. And low classes in Egypt were forbidden from wearing the color red on their nails.
Oh, so it could only be like this is not for you. This is only for the high class individuals.
Yep, pretty much.
It's exclusive.
Exclusive. High class only.
Interesting. Wow, I'm really impressed that nail polish has been around that long.
I know. I definitely didn't realize that that's how long we were doing manicures. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Your nails can get kind of dirty and, something to clean up. Yeah, so really, I think a lot of our current even makeup trends can be traced
still
all the way back to Egypt and India and China.
Right? Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, so I also looked up a little bit about the history of blush too. And that was also used in very early China during the Shang Dynasty, which was 1600 to 1046 BCE.
Okay.
That was when blush started to be used in China. And then later in the Tang Dynasty, there's a lot of references of people wearing pretty heavy blush as a trend. So I didn't see anything about blush in Egypt as much, but yeah, I thought it was kind of cool that it's very Chinese makeup.
So some of the Egyptian trends, I think, also really stuck around for the ancient Greek and Roman Empire too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I noticed when I was looking at mascara in ancient Rome, they used a mixture of coal and burnt cork to create a mascara.
Okay.
Yeah. Also in Rome, Pliny the Elder, if you've ever heard of him, he's a philosopher.
Yep. And geographer. He's like the oldest geographer.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the oldest geographer. So he actually wrote that eyelashes would fall out from excessive sex. Like basically if you were having too much sex, your eyelashes would fall out. And so Roman women would make their eyelashes stand out and coat them in that like primitive mascara to show that they were chaste. Yeah.
Oh my God.
To show so like mascara became a symbol of purity in their culture.
Whose eyelashes are just falling out?
What is happening? I don't know.
Okay. I don't know where that thought process came from.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like one of those. It was probably like just meant to scare people into abstinence, I guess. But
I guess I don't think they were really concerned with abstinence back then. Though. So
Pliny the Elder was. He was worried about your eyelashes falling out.
All right. I mean, okay.
Yeah, and then also in ancient Greece and Rome, they favored like a lighter complexion. So they were making foundations or like face powders with chalk and lead again. And, you know, having a lighter skin tone was a sign of being wealthier because it meant you didn't like work outside. You weren't tanned from the sun. So that was definitely a trend for them as well.
Interesting.
And then brows, I thought the brow trends in ancient Greece and Rome were also fascinating because they actually preferred you to have a unibrow.
What?
And
no.
Yes. Unibrows were totally in and totally sexy. And if you didn't have one, you filled in the middle with like kohl or other like pigmented stuff.
Shout out Helga from Hey Arnold. She would have been so hot.
And Oscar the Grouch.
Wow, unibrows.
And Frida Kahlo. What? Yeah. Right? Yeah, so that was there was definitely brow makeup going on back then, and the brow trend was a nice unibrow.
Fascinating. I guess they weren't concerned about shaving off their eyebrow to honor their cats that passed away.
No, not as much as the Egyptians.
Man, that is okay. Unibrows. I wonder how ancient Romans would have thought of these like micro brow trend. They would have been like, "What is happening?"
They would have hated it.
Yeah, they would have been very confused by that situation. I read about lipstick in ancient Greece, so I thought this was fascinating. Is lipstick was growing in popularity in ancient Greece. It kind of came over from Egypt as like a popular thing. And there was this growth as a result of the growing trend of using lipstick of fears of deception by women for painting their lips. And so then it became this thing where they basically decided that the only people that were allowed to wear lipstick were sex workers. And not only were the only people that were allowed to wear lipstick sex workers, but sex workers had to paint their lips, because if they didn't paint their lips, they could be like jailed or fined by pretending to be a regular lady as opposed to a sex worker.
What?
Yes. So like,
what?
So they were like required as like their uniform of being a sex worker to wear lipstick.
So lipstick became like the brand of.
Yeah.
This is
like,
yeah.
Yep. Like,
this is
I
my
am
job.
a sex worker. I am wearing lipstick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you know what the lipstick that they wore was made out of?
What? Lead?
It was made out of mulberries, seaweed.
Okay.
Sheep sweat.
Ew.
And crocodile excrement.
Oh.
Yep.
How do you collect sheep sweat?
I don't know. But also, like, we're putting just crocodile excrement on our lips.
Yeah. That must have been great when you get a little kissy going.
Well, I mean, maybe this is where prostitutes don't kiss. Maybe that's where that comes from. I don't know, right? Like, we're throwing it back to Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman?
Yeah. No kissing, because I'm wearing crocodile excrement on my lips.
Right.
As per required by law.
Yeah. Yeah, like, there wasn't anything better to mix in with your lipstick for that? I mean, the berry's fine. That'll stain your lips. Like, just stop there.
Yeah, I don't know. It must have been, like, the good, like, texture or something, or, like...
Ew. Wow.
I know. Gross.
Yeah.
Gross.
Ew.
So, yeah, so in ancient Greece, sex workers were required. But then it switched. And so in Roman times, it also indicated status, but in the opposite way. So wealthy people wore lipstick and poor people didn't.
How confusing for everyone.
I know.
How confusing for women in general, too.
Like,
am I supposed to wear lipstick?
Are you wealthy? I don't know. Are you a wealthy prostitute? Yeah. Like, what's happening? But what's crazy is, so wealthier people in Rome could afford, quote unquote, better lipstick. But the better lipstick was actually made with mercury-laden vermilion.
Oh, nice.
Whereas lower classes would use, like, wine to stain their lips. So, like, upper classes were basically like poisoning themselves by wearing this like nicer lipstick. And then lower classes were like totally fine just using wine to stain their lips.
Yeah.
Joke's on you, wealthy people in Rome, I guess. But men also wore lipstick in Rome, again, as a class distinguished thing. So if you were a wealthy man, then you wore lipstick to show that you could afford mercury.
I wonder if the mercury made it really shiny.
I mean, probably, right?
Yeah.
Like, probably was like really nicely lacquered.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So fun times.
But again, not good for the kissy. Like, that doesn't seem like.
Not
to
great.
Ingest some mercury.
Not great for that. Blush also was used in both Greece and Rome, but it was just very subtle to give your face color. Noticeable.
After you made it paler, then you need to put some color back on.
You need some because noticeable blush was kind of frowned upon. Like, they didn't really.
Okay. Yeah. So funny enough, although in ancient Greece and Rome, they were all about the unibrow, I then learned that in the Middle Ages, the brow trend went the exact opposite. So I did not realize this, but it makes sense now that I'm thinking back to like art around the Middle Ages and like how people were portrayed. But they actually thought that the larger your forehead was, the more attractive that was.
Okay. All right.
So
justice for large foreheads.
Right. So in order to emphasize that, they would remove their eyebrows, remove their eyelashes, and then also sometimes would even tweeze their hairline to cause their hairline to go further back so that their forehead would be even bigger. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a level.
Right? And so they were still wearing, I guess, a little bit of brow makeup because they might pencil back on a very thin eyebrow, but they would just get rid of all of the hair.
Wow.
Now, that was a trend, I guess, until the 1700s, when then women who had over tweezed their eyebrows, like, if you know from the early 2000s.
That's what I was going to say. If you know, you know.
Yes. They actually started making eyebrow wigs out of mouse hair.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. So we were doing like microblading, like with mouse hair?
Well, I mean, it's a wig, so it wasn't even a tattoo, but yes, a wig. A little, I guess, that they would stick onto their face. Little fluffy mouse hair eyebrows.
Okay.
So yeah, the Middle Ages was like a weird time for makeup, I feel like.
I was gonna say, the Middle Ages, from what I read, was like, no, makeup is bad. And it basically tied into very early Christian beliefs where if you did anything to your body, then you were going against God.
Okay.
Right? So
yep.
It's like they very much frowned upon pretty much all makeup during the Middle Ages is what I saw.
From what I read, when it comes to foundation, it was still more popular to have a paler complexion in the Middle Ages. Because again, you weren't working outside. And so they were using lead-based paint mixtures on their skin still during that time.
Love it.
Leading to disfigurement and death.
Odd.
I know.
Makeup's like dangerous.
Well, you know that beauty is pain, isn't that the saying?
Right.
Like takes it to a whole nother level.
And I will say too that this is a very European, Western-centric history of makeup. I tried to find more information about these Chinese trends and Japanese trends of makeup and stuff, and it was a little difficult to find, which I was a little disappointed about. But the reason I bring that up is because in the Middle East and India, they're still using kohl, eyeliner, kajal. They're still using all of these from ancient times. Still believe in the evil eye. That whole situation is still happening, still happens today in some places. In India, especially, kajal is used for enhancing eyes for dancing. And so a lot of traditional Indian dances, you're wearing a lot of eye makeup to demonstrate the eye movements and stuff so that people in the audience can see what's going on. So, but essentially when Europeans went to the Middle East during the Crusades, there's some discussion that they were reintroduced to some of these makeup trends and then brought some of those back with them. And in particular, Queen Elizabeth. So this is early Renaissance, post Middle Ages, right? 1600s. She was influenced by these makeup trends and she started wearing some types of makeup. Queen Elizabeth started wearing lipstick. She wore red lipstick, which of course made it trending because it was Queen Elizabeth.
Yes.
And red lipstick in particular was believed to repel evil spirits, the color red. So she started wearing that. And then, you mentioned like the pale skin trend. That was definitely still happening during that era. And so what happened with blush is that it became popular to put, like you might see in movies or something that take place in like 1600s, where they have rougey cheeks.
Yeah, circular.
And so the idea behind that was that if you put the blush on your cheeks, then it would further demonstrate how pale your skin was.
Okay. So adding contrast, right?
Yes. So if you put the dollops of blush on your cheeks, then you know how pale you actually are. So it further shows your paleness by having the blush. So that was sort of like the Renaissance era makeup trend.
Okay.
That I found.
Thanks to Queen Elizabeth.
I know. Trendsetter right there.
Yes.
But it was short-lived is what I learned. Basically, after Queen Elizabeth, there started to be pretty big backlash against a lot of stuff fueled in part by the religious revolutions that were going on in Europe at the time, right? That's when we have the Reformation and all this stuff. And so there was a lot of societal fears surrounding witchcraft, and makeup became associated with witchcraft because it was seen as women deceiving men.
Of course.
Right. Right. And so much so that in 1770 in the UK, Parliament passed a law that said that any woman deemed to be using makeup as a means of tricking men into marriage could be tried as a witch.
Okay, hold on.
Yep. Yes. So Parliament passed legislation that made anything that altered a woman's appearance, whether it was wigs, false teeth, high-heeled shoes, or makeup, grounds for having her marriage annulled or being tried for witchcraft.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So we hate women.
Well, we hate women who are making themselves look different, and men can't be held accountable for making an appropriate marriage decision if, those tricksters, those
if a woman is tricking,
have lured them into a marriage.
Exactly.
With lipstick and rouge.
Lipstick and high heels.
That's right.
Yeah, so there were laws in the UK that were passed specifically against makeup. So you really have very little makeup happening during that time frame. So, fast forward from 1770 through Victorian era, which was basically through the 1800s, essentially makeup was associated with prostitutes. Ladies did not wear makeup.
Yeah, the Victorians really hated anything that made you feel good.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, they were too busy wearing lead-laden veils when their husbands died or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like the Victorian era really was all about, let's see how we can make women unhappy.
I think it's more like, let's see how we can make all of humans unhappy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not seeing much of a benefit.
They weren't very joyful. Yeah, they weren't. It wasn't a very time. Right? Everything's so serious. You're so serious.
Yes.
You can't wear makeup. You have to mourn your husband for 2 years and just go to church and lock yourself away.
Yeah, you need to read books about science. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. Hey, Katie, remember that time that we wanted to start a podcast based on all of our random research conversations?
Yeah, and we had no idea what we were doing or how we would even make a podcast.
Yeah, that's the time. It was a really good thing we found Podbean, because that made it super easy to upload all of our episodes to multiple streaming platforms.
Podbean is a really simple platform for hosting and publishing your podcast.
So, if you and your best friend are having random conversations that you think should be a podcast, check out Podbean.
And if you do, use our link to get a month free. Podbean.com/obvious. That's PODBEAN.com/obvious.
And become super cool podcasters like us.
World famous.
But I did read, though, that once we sort of start exiting the Victorian era, especially when we get to the 1920s, that's when we start having a bit of a resurgence in makeup.
That leads us into the modern makeup era, when it really started to take off.
Yes. What's crazy, though, well, and in other places, too, because what's crazy is that this also just relates back to Egypt.
Really?
Because what I read is that specifically for eyeliner and a couple other things, in 1912 is when there was this whole Egyptology craze going on. And there was a German who unearthed Nefertiti's tomb.
Okay.
This is when The Mummy happens, the movie. So basically when the movie The Mummy occurs, so Nefertiti's tomb gets unearthed by a German in 1912. And they put her bust on display in a German museum. And it really highlighted all of the makeup that Nefertiti wore, especially her really iconic winged eyeliner.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. Nefertiti's the OG makeup influencer. And so this spurred this kind of craze for all things Egypt, but also wanting to emulate this sort of like Nefertiti style and look.
That makes sense.
And at that same time in the 1920s is when we start having the rise of Hollywood and sort of that old glamour and the silent film era. So several movies were made that were Cleopatra and this like Egypt themed films. But not only that, but what looks good in black and white is when you do really nice accentuated
shadowed
eyeliner and things like this. So the early 1920s film stars were not only doing Egypt themed films because it was popular at the time, but they were also like emulating this style of makeup because it looked good on black and white. And so eyeliner becomes really a popular thing after these, 1920s Hollywood films start portraying it. And what's interesting too is around the same time, Hollywood's growth starts happening. Bollywood in India, their film scene also starts growing at this time as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so in 1913, there was a really famous Bollywood film that came out that portrayed men and women both wearing really heavy eyeliner in some of the dances, and that further propelled the sort of Indian side of wanting to wear eyeliner too. So it was movie trends on two sides of the world. Like portraying this heavy use of eyeliner starting in the teens and 20s.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense because when I was looking at mascara, the first modern formulation actually was made for Queen Victoria, but by a chemist, Eugene Rimmel, and you might notice that name because it's a very famous makeup brand still today. And it was basically petroleum jelly mixed with coal. So you still see the influence of coal there, but now we have refined petroleum products that are starting to emerge. And so they're starting to apply those to makeup formulations. And so in the 20th century in America, Thomas Lyle Wilson created a mascara formula for his sister, Mabel. And in 1917, so around that film time that you're talking about, when that's, spurring on the popularity of makeup again, he had a mail order cosmetics business selling his product called Lash Brow Een, is what it was called, Lash Brow Een. Eventually, he changed the name of the company to Maybelline.
That's why I was wondering where it was going for.
Yes, it was a combination of his sister's name, Mabel, and then the Een was from Vaseline, which is petroleum jelly, right? So, and that was what was part of the formulation. But that kind of mascara was actually a cake type of mascara, so it was sold in a little box tin with a brush that you would get a little bit wet and then like rub it in the tin and put it on your lashes. But like you pointed out, the mascara during that new era of film was important because that heavier makeup stood up under the lighting and appeared better on film. So in tandem with the eyeliner, mascara was used for the same thing. And then similarly, modern foundation really came about because of the stage and because of film. So like what people kind of consider one of the first formulations of modern foundation was grease paint. And this was invented by a German actor, Karl Boden. He performed at a theater in Germany, and he wanted something to cover up the line between his wig and his face. So he had a wig on, and he wanted it to look more natural instead of like very obviously a wig. So he created a mixture of zinc, white, ochre, vermilion, which are types of pigments from different places, and then blended it with animal lard to smooth it right on his face. Yeah, so he created something that was kind of meant to mimic his face color. Yeah, but then like also added in the lard and then used that to cover the area like where his wig met his face. And then that really gained some traction again in the theater world and then in the film world, and eventually would lead to what we know as foundation.
Interesting.
And then the last thing was, I think in general, men in public and whatnot in that era, early 1900s, might have gravitated more toward a face powder, something that might look a little bit more natural. So grease paint was very much being used on the stage and in film, but it wasn't necessarily widespread as just like an everyday product.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a couple different makeup trends that I found that weren't necessarily related to film though, but still kind of grew around this era.
Mm-hmm.
One, of course, is lipstick. So lipstick wasn't really allowed in Victorian era times, but during the suffragette movement, so in the teens and 20s, lipstick became popularized as an empowering badge of courage for suffragettes to wear while they were out like picketing and fighting to get the vote out. So much so that they would pass out lipstick to people when they would show up for like picket lines and stuff. And so red lipstick was sort of this like fight the man situation. Put on my red lipstick to empower myself to go eat the patriarchy. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of fun facts about lipstick. And then nails. So the first nail salon in the US was Mrs. Prey's Manicure, and that was opened in 1878, actually. Pretty early on. And it was opened by Mary E. Cobb, who saw nail salons in Paris and then brought it to the US. But fun fact, she is also the person that is credited with inventing the emery board.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool. So manicures were becoming popular, and even by like the 1910s, there were advertisements in magazines and newspapers and stuff for manicure sets that you could buy. And they were essentially like cleaning sets. So you would clean, you could buff your nails and make them shiny, and maybe there was some sort of like lotion or something to like put on.
Yep. Wash off the soot from the factory or factory job.
Yeah. Exactly. But the first nail polish was invented in 1925. So modern version of nail polish was invented in 1925 by Q-Tex. And it was a varnish that was based on automobile paint. So during the 20s, you have this growth of also the auto industry, and they saw automobile paint and said, oh, we could let's put that on a similar thing into, And then Q-Tex invented nail polish remover, acetone based, because they were using kind of intense polish to put on your nails. Yeah. They invented that remover in 1928. Okay. So it was sort of like, we created this product and now women can't get it off, and no solution for that.
Yeah.
But the first nail polish that's more of like what nail polish is today, not like an automobile paint type nail polish, was actually introduced in 1932, so a few years later, and it was by Revlon. And that was the first product that Revlon started with. So
so they were originally nail polish.
Yep, they started with nail polish. That was their first product, and then they grew as a makeup line from there.
So brow-wise, in the 20s...
yes. Tell me about the brows.
Brow trends crack me up. They're all over the board all the time.
Yeah, that's funny.
Most drastic trend changers in makeup. Because, so obviously during the Victorian era, since they're not into makeup and they're very much into like au naturel, don't do anything to yourself, like natural brows were just, they weren't doing anything to them, right? 1920s, they go back to very thin, very thin and very dramatic, like arched. In the 20s. And so oftentimes too, they would be like plucked or, shaved or whatever, and then drawn back on in a very like thin line. And that actually persisted into the 30s, which those pencil thin eyebrows and what some people might consider like old Hollywood glamour.
Okay.
So that's where brows were at that time. mascara was being used, as well as darker eyeshadows, again related to the film industry for makeup under the lights that accentuated your eyes and made them kind of stick out in film.
Interesting.
But yes, we're back to the extra thin painted on eyebrows.
Why is this
I don't know. But just wait, it'll change again. It's like
trend. I know.
Yeah.
I never really thought about makeup in this sort of like women's empowerment thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like today, like, that's not always how makeup is portrayed. It's portrayed as
right. I feel like it's portrayed as something opposite.
Yes, like it's a way to make yourself look good for
Men,
other people
to
look
gaze.
at you. Yeah, right.
The male gaze.
But I think it's so interesting that it was sort of like, especially with lipstick, suffragettes are sort of claiming it as their like badge of courage, and
which, when you think about it too, is pretty progressive, considering that people associated that with sex work.
Yes, with prostitutes, right?
Like a lower class woman who was not respected.
And then when we get to World War II, makeup is also seen as this empowering badge of courage as well, because makeup was almost considered a morale booster during World War II. If you see the Rosie the Riveter poster, she's not just like a plain Jane on this poster. Yeah. She's got the bright red lipstick. She's got the winged eyeliner.
Groomed brows.
Yep, exactly. Women during World War II often would be, encouraged to put on makeup as sort of just this, way to
brighten people's days.
Exactly. And like show your patriotism in a weird way.
I wonder if it had something to do with like kind of putting on a quote unquote like strong face.
Yeah, right? Like brave face or something.
Like a brave face, because we're in this really tough time. Yeah.
And it was also a way too to mimic things that weren't available. So eyeliner specifically, because there was such a shortage of stockings for women at the time, they would take eyeliner pencils and draw like a seam up the back of their legs.
Really? So that it looked like they were?
To look like they were wearing stockings when it was, because they couldn't get them.
Interesting.
Because there was a shortage. So I thought that was kind of cute in a way, to use makeup in just a different method. I don't know.
Well, a different context too.
Yeah.
Right? A much different meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. In 1938, Congress passed the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which gave authority to the FDA to regulate cosmetics. And so, we were talking about all these cosmetics that were not safe, right? It had like lead and like all sorts of crazy things in them. It started to create a problem because makeup was becoming trendy again. So people were really having some serious health issues from this makeup. Women were blinded. There was like reports of women dying from some makeup. And so that's why Congress passed the act in 1938 to regulate makeup. And that really also propelled the use of makeup a lot more in society, because it became much safer to use because ingredients were being regulated. And something also that's interesting is in the 1930s and continuing into the World War II era, cosmetics were one of the only industries that saw growth during the Great Depression.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
This effect has been observed since the Great Depression in other recessions that have happened throughout time. So even in the most recent recession in 2008, the cosmetic industry still grew and did fine.
Went strong.
Yeah, and economists actually refer to this as the lipstick effect.
Yeah.
And the idea is that in times where things are tougher economically, people will often like trade down, buy like cheaper versions of other products to save money, but they'll also tend to use their money to buy small luxuries instead of large purchases. And so makeup is usually one of those things that during tough times, it always continues to do well because people will make themselves feel better with a small makeup purchase or something like that.
Yeah,
instead
that
of
makes
like
total
a bigger
sense.
purchase.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. So during this time too, late 30s, early 40s, this is when modern foundation was launched as well. So the first kind of modern foundation that's more similar to what we wear today was invented by Max Factor, and they patented it was called pancake makeup. So again, it was like something that was in a tin. It was made with talc instead of oil like the grease paint was, or like a lard. So it was much lighter. It was considered more natural looking. And basically you could take a powder puff or a little bit of moisture and then use it on the pan-caked makeup and then pat it onto your face. And that was in 1937. So like you said, even during a time of economic strife, it was a very successful launch. They made a lot of money on it. And it was well purchased.
Yeah, right. That's like with nail polish launch, like Revlon starts in the 30s, you know? So it is interesting that you see that.
I guess I'll just say too that through the 30s and then even into the 40s, brows also stayed pretty thin. But in the 40s, they got more arched. So that's fun.
Yay.
Yeah. And also more natural eyeshadow was trendy during that time too. So browns, beiges, that kind of thing. Like crazy colors or things like that.
Yeah. What is interesting is that after World War II, it feels like that's when we almost like lose a little bit of this sort of women taking ownership of makeup trend, because it was sort of seen like, oh, when men came back from the war and we shifted to the idea that women should be in the home and domesticity and all that stuff, women were almost encouraged to wear makeup to look good for men who were coming back.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's when you start, I don't know, almost losing this idea that makeup was
for women,
the brave face for women, or like the thing that women did to stand out for themselves. But then you also get, I think, after the 50s and into the 60s is when you get a little more of the alternative styles of makeup, and also like men playing with makeup, especially in the 60s and 70s with the growth of glam rock and stuff. You have men really popularizing guy liner and things like this
stage
that maybe
makeup,
weren't as popular before.
So for the products that I was looking at in the 50s, I would say it's really just refinement of formulas at this point, right? Because I think they're discovering new ingredients to use, and so makeup quality is getting better, but it's still kind of based on those original foundations that we were talking about that came out of the 20s and 30s, but they're just kind of trying to improve them overall. And I do see it with brows. The thicker brows started to come back in the 1950s. So that became popular again. So brow grooming, you might put some petroleum jelly, comb through and make sure that they look nice, but you want them to be thicker, not thin. So we're back to thick eyebrows in the 50s. And actually the 50s was a big time for eyeshadow. So before that, eyeshadow was kind of, it could be a little bit like one note, right? So it was used in movies and film, and women wore it out like maybe in the evening in the 20s and 30s. But again, not a ton of colors or variation in that. But in the 50s, it started being offered in a greater range of shades. So you see some of the more like fun, playful colors come out in the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah, I feel like the 60s especially, I always think of the eyeshadow trends of green and blue and
very much.
Yeah, it was like
and dramatic eyeliner and mascara as well.
Eyeliner,
definitely. And bold eyelashes. The 60s are actually the first time that a tube of mascara came out. Like women were using the little tinned mascara in a cake form for a long time, and the 60s was the first tube of mascara with the the spoolie inside. But yeah, think about some of the iconic, I think, 50s and 60s makeup people would be Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, right? So I
saw Twiggy, right?
Yes,
as well,
Twiggy with the very defined lashes.
Yeah, lashes. Yeah.
Yes, so that was definitely the trend at that time. What a lot of people would consider old glam looks. And in the face, we also see cream foundation coming into play with a face powder on top to set it.
Mm-hmm.
And also some of the popularity of redness went away. So like instead of red lips, pink lips, or like a softer lip look. Same with cheeks. Instead of like a bolder blush look, we're looking at like more pinks and subtler colors during that time. And 70s was interesting as well, because that's a time where what I was reading about was there were kind of two main makeup looks. One was kind of like the flower child, right? The hippie subculture movement was all about just being very natural. So almost no makeup at all, natural brows, very minimalist kind of makeup.
I feel like that's where we're like going today with this like
yes, it is. It's coming back.
Right. The cyclical
it's coming back
pattern with the flare jeans and everything.
Yep. But then the other part of the 70s trend was the disco culture. And that was all about much bolder looks, sparkly looks, like shimmer eyeshadow was becoming very popular, brighter colors. Brows still natural, though. Pretty natural brows in the 70s.
Okay.
And then that dovetailed into the 80s, which we all know was a crazy time for makeup. Anything went. Neon colors. Yeah.
I'm about it.
Really bright eyeshadows, really big hair. Blush was bright.
Right.
Lips were bright. Men were wearing makeup.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. And very, very bushy brows. So not just natural groomed brows, but like bring the bushiness back. You want those caterpillar eyebrows.
Yes.
Not a unibrow, though. Right. That has never come back. But
no unibrows. Yeah. But don't worry, because then we'll just rebound from the 80s and pluck all of our eyebrows off again.
Yes, which is exactly what happened in the 90s. So yeah, what's funny is then in the 90s, there were also kind of a couple of different very iconic makeup styles. And one of them was from the grunge subculture, right? So like darker makeup, darker lips, heavy eyeliner and eyeshadow in darker colors. But then there was pencil thin eyebrows, way overplucked and then drawn back on. But then the other looks you might be familiar with are kind of the brighter, more metallic colors and shimmery kind of looks that then led into the early 2000s, which became very shiny and shimmery.
Very shiny. And the Dream
just
Matte
all
Mousse
over. Yes,
foundation.
The Dream Matte Mousse
Don't
foundation
that
was like, oh my gosh. It was like so thick. It was so thick.
I don't even know. Thick. Yeah, my pores were not breathing. Like
nope. And I remember just like dipping my fingers in it and just like smearing it over my face. Like not even like using a brush or sponge applicator all the time.
Not.
Like, oh, it was bad. It was a bad time. It was a bad time. The frosty lip gloss.
Yep.
Extra like reflective.
Yep.
And thin eyebrows obviously stayed in throughout the 2000s as well. Very
Some of us are still recovering from that.
Yeah. Fully lined eyes, upper and lower, and pretty heavy mascara too. So, and then it's interesting because in the 2010s, they kind of refer to that as like the age of the makeup influencer, right? So YouTube is gaining traction.
I mean, I'm going to argue that the age of the makeup influencer was freaking Nefertiti. That's all I'm going to say. Like,
all right. So the age of the digital influencer.
Yeah, there we go. Because I don't know. If anyone's influencing makeup, I'm sorry. Nefertiti, like, from the grave, brought back makeup to become mainstream.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That's a legacy right there. Yeah, that's a big legacy.
Crazy. But yeah, I agree though that then you start getting YouTube tutorials and
and like, Facebook and Instagram, all those things are making makeup trends more widespread and also I think changing more quickly. But this was definitely a time where I was trying to hop on some of these trends too. But brows had to go back to being not only full, but let's make them even bigger than what they actually are on your face. Buy yourself a brow stencil and paint on a giant brow that like goes way past your eye and is like extremely, like the lines were very
Yeah, I just remember
harsh.
going from like 0 brows to like the biggest brow you can ever imagine. And I was like, how?
Yeah.
How are we doing this?
Yes.
We plucked all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm telling you, I remember watching videos of a stencil on the person's face, and then you take like a brush with powder on it, you stencil it onto your face in the shape of an eyebrow. That's what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
So that was really big in the 2010s. And then contouring. So in addition to foundation still being very popular and fairly heavy, people were putting on a good layer. They want it to look very like not like your skin. Mm-hmm. And then also adding in contour and highlighter to create different facial shapes, which is not really something that had been done before. Bronzer, contour, highlighter, all of those are much more recent phenomenon.
Witchy deception. I feel like contouring is magic to me. Because whenever I see videos of people doing it, I'm like, how? Yeah. Your face is totally different than what it was before. I'm so confused.
Yep. It makes a huge difference if you can do it right. But it also, to me, looks very artificial a lot of times because people can go very heavy on it. And so I think it looks good in a picture and in the right lighting. Yes. But like to see someone in real life wearing that heavy of makeup, a lot of times it looks very artificial to me.
I think like makeup trends today, to me, feel like they are designed for being on a camera, though. Like it's almost like we're going back to the like Hollywood influencer thing of the 20s where, you know, we're doing it for the camera and then it's becoming an off-camera trend. I almost feel like that's what's happening today with like Instagram Reels and TikTok and YouTube. It's like you're doing it for the camera and then that's therefore influencing the outside world.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a defining factor of the 2010s for makeup, for sure. Another thing that got really popular during that time is really large lips, and people would overline them. So like actually draw their lip line outside of their natural lips.
Duck
and then
lips.
Yes, that's right. The duck lips. And that I didn't realize, but it definitely spurred a bunch of people to then consider things like lip fillers. And the big lip trend has definitely stuck into present day. I feel like that's still something that's pretty trendy.
I was thinking about that with eyeliner, how, that late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, what I still do today, whatever, like dark eyeliner was so trendy that people started tattooing it.
Yes.
Remember that? Like, and I think about that and I'm like, man, I want to meet someone today that has their eyeliner tattooed from like back in the day, right? Because like, I don't know. That was definitely a trend. I remember that. People started tattooing eyeliner on.
Yep. I remember that too. Because everyone wore a lot of eyeliner.
Yeah, you put it on every day. So kind of made sense.
Yep. And then, like you mentioned before, I looked up some more recent trends. Not that I really care what the recent trends are, but I like to know because I'm like, maybe there's something I want to try, right? That's different. I don't need to brand myself as a millennial all the time. So, I can be hip. I can be cool. But the no makeup look is making a comeback. So people want it to be like as natural looking as possible. Or are doing full face, so foundation and blush and perhaps contour and highlight, but then leaving their eyes pretty much with nothing. Which again, seems very weird to me. I can't get on that. I need my mascara. I'm addicted to my mascara. It's a very important makeup product for me.
Well, I think makeup in general, like obviously there's all these trends that have come out. But then there's also sort of these like cultural reasons too, right? You have like the religious connotations that we talked about like way back thousands of years ago. But then you have like, you know, also the like feminist sort of political statement that you're making. Yeah. And I'm just going to put a plug in for this book that I found because I thought it was interesting. It's called Eyeliner, A Cultural History. Zara Hankir, Hankir. But I thought it was interesting because she literally talks about this history of eyeliner, but also talks about how it does sort of become not only like cultural, religious, political, but like a true piece of like who you are and your identity. like her last chapter is about Amy Winehouse and her iconic eyeliner. And, you know, it becomes defining in that way, right? Like Taylor Swift and her like red lipstick too, right?
Yes.
Or
Yep.
the Kardashians, right? Like, so it's like these sorts of, I don't know, makeup trends like do become a defining feature.
Imprinted. Yeah, imprinted on the cultural conscious.
Yeah, and also on your individual identity too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what's interesting about modern makeup is that I think it's become much more about artistic and individual expression for some people. I mean, like you said, I get the sense that there's still some views of makeup that it's somehow not a feminist thing to wear, or that it's, you know, that it's for men and not like for yourself or whatever. But then I think there's also a big camp of people who see makeup as a way to individually express themselves, just like fashion or anything else. And the other thing that I've noticed more recently, which I think is great and I am on board for it, but definitely was not around when I was in high school wearing makeup, is the makeup as skincare trend too. So something that's becoming really popular is like foundations that also have like benefits for your skin, right? Like everything has a moisturizer in it now. Everything has a sunscreen in it now. It's all about like what benefit can you get from the makeup other than the fact that it looks a certain way.
And it's almost like throwing it way back to like 3000 BC, right? Where they were literally wearing eyeliner to protect their eyes. Diseases. Yeah.
Yep. And now it's like, here's how we can moisturize your face and you can wear makeup at the same time.
Yeah. Or protective was why they were wearing eyeliner.
Yes.
So it is sort of like, this weird like full circle where
functionality.
Right, there is that function.
Yeah. Like practical functionality.
Also, while also being like an artistic expression. And I feel like this episode really, it did sort of change the way I had thought about makeup in that way. And I don't know.
Well, we should have mentioned earlier, I was successful in converting you to makeup. Like,
it's true.
really pushed.
Do wear more than eyeliner and mascara now.
Yeah.
I love a brow. Yep. I love a brow pencil. You know, I'm really into that lately. And
yeah. But I don't know. It is interesting to think about. Well, one, how far back makeup goes just in the world. Yeah. So for a long, long time, it's something that like the way people look at themselves and want to maybe enhance or modify their look has existed forever.
Yeah.
Even during a time where it, you know,
maybe it was frowned upon.
Right. And wasn't a highly commercialized industry yet, even. People were finding ways to use makeup in that way, so
to express themselves. And thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts.